The dense morning fog hovered over the ancient kingdom of Avalora, where the mountains guarded secrets from time immemorial. At the heart of this realm, a young king named Edward walked slowly through the stone corridors of his palace, carrying an invisible weight on his shoulders. His crown gleamed, yet his mind was clouded with uncertainty. Though he ruled with firmness, he felt that something essential eluded him, a deeper knowledge that no written law could provide. A growing unease took root in his heart. What does it truly mean to be just? His court was filled with advisors who spoke of rules and punishments, but within him burned a desire to understand something greater, something that transcended mere words. That day, Edward made a decision that would change his life forever. He would embark on a journey in search of true justice. In the distance, the temple bells tolled, their echoes rolling through the valleys like a silent call to those seeking answers. Edward knew he could not rule by decrees and cold judgments alone. He needed to grasp the essence of wisdom and compassion. Moved by this yearning, he shed his royal ornaments, donned simple clothes, and set out without an escort, determined to learn from those who bowed not to gold, but to the understanding of life itself. His destination was uncertain, but his heart burned with the conviction that true justice was not found in the grand halls of the palace, but in the real world, where every gaze and every gesture revealed hidden truths. The first days of Edward's journey were lonely. Without the protection of his royal guard or the luxuries of the palace, he felt the hardships his people endured. His feet ached on the stone roads, and hunger became a constant companion. One cold night, as he sought shelter beneath an ancient tree, he encountered a serene-looking monk named Thomas. The man, wrapped in simple robes, noticed Edward's exhaustion and offered him a warm cup of tea. "Justice is not a sword, but a balance," Thomas said, without needing to ask Edward's identity. Intrigued, the king asked to accompany him, eager to understand the meaning behind those words. In the days that followed, he followed the monk to a humble village, where he witnessed something he had never seen in his own court. Decisions made not through imposition, but through listening and understanding. It was there that Edward faced his first true dilemma. In the center of the village, two farmers, James and Robert, argued over a disputed piece of land. Each claimed it as his own, and tempers flared. Instinctively, Edward felt the urge to intervene and impose a swift judgment, as he had always done in his palace. But Thomas stopped him with a simple glance. "Listen before you decide," the monk advised. And for the first time, Edward learned the value of silence. When he allowed both men to speak, he realized that the conflict was not just about the land, but about years of unresolved resentment. Rather than awarding the land to one and punishing the other, the monk suggested they find a way to share it, so both could benefit from its soil. To Edward's surprise, the men agreed. He wondered how many times, in his own court, he had handed down sentences without truly understanding the roots of the problems before him. The journey continued, and Edward encountered other stories that challenged him. In a neighboring town, he met Margaret, a woman accused of theft. The local court had already decided her fate. She would be exiled at dawn. But something about the way Margaret kept her head lowered sparked the disguised king's curiosity. Digging deeper, he discovered that she had stolen bread to feed her sick child. Rigid justice condemned the act without considering the suffering behind it. Edward realized that if he truly wanted to rule with wisdom, he needed to see beyond the surface of mere facts. Thomas taught him that judging without understanding is like trying to cut water with a sword, futile and cruel. For the first time, Edward questioned his past decisions. How many injustices had he allowed simply by following the law without looking into the eyes of those who suffered? Edward began to understand that true justice was not about punishment or reward, but about balancing the forces that shape life. He learned that a wise leader does not seek only the truth of the facts, but the truth of the heart. And with each lesson absorbed, a new challenge emerged. Letting go of his pride, listening without haste, and accepting that the answer is not always found in what seems obvious. Alongside Thomas, he realized that justice, when practiced with compassion, becomes something greater than a verdict. It becomes a path to healing, both for those who judge and those who are judged. The journey was not yet over, but Edward was no longer the same man who had left the palace. One night, as he walked under the pale glow of the moon, Edward and Thomas arrived at an abandoned temple atop a hill. The place was silent, except for the sound of the wind whispering through the trees. There, the monk asked the young king to sit before an ancient mirror and look at himself. "What do you see?" Thomas asked. Edward hesitated. He saw a weary man, a traveler who had learned more in a few weeks than in years on the throne. "I see someone who sought justice but found himself," he replied, his voice heavy with reflection. Thomas smiled gently. "True justice begins within us. If we govern without understanding our own shadows, we project them onto our judgments." At that moment, Edward understood. Before he could change the world, he needed to transform his own heart. The next morning, as he descended the hill, Edward came across a group of villagers in the middle of an argument. A young man named William was demanding vengeance against an older man who had cut down the only tree that provided shade for his family's field. The accused, an elderly woodcutter named George, did not deny his actions. Instead, he explained that the tree was diseased and could have fallen on the children who often played beneath it. Edward observed carefully, realizing that both men held a truth of their own. The old Edward would have made a swift decision, favoring one side over the other, but now he understood that true justice was not about winning or losing. It was about understanding and reconciliation. Rather than punishing the woodcutter or dismissing the young man's pain, he suggested they plant new trees together, sharing the effort to rebuild what had been lost. What had begun as a conflict transformed into an act of unity. As Edward watched the solution take shape, he felt a deep sense of relief. For the first time, he truly understood that a great leader does not rule through fear or judgment, but through wisdom and empathy. Justice was not a rigid scale measuring equal weights, but a dynamic balance between reason and compassion. He turned to Thomas, who simply nodded, as if he had known this moment would come. And in that instant, Edward realized he was ready to return to his kingdom, not as the same ruler who had left, but as a transformed man. Now he carried with him a new way of seeing the world, one that was not bound solely by laws, but by the hidden truths within people's stories. His journey had changed him, and that would be the greatest gift he could bring back to Avalora. Edward returned to his kingdom as a different man. It was not the gleam of his crown that impressed his people, but the calm in his gaze and the wisdom in his words. Now, before making any decision, he listened. Before passing judgment, he sought to understand. And before punishing, he looked for ways to restore. His reign was not perfect, for justice is never a final destination, but a path in constant evolution. Yet his people began to trust, not just the king, but the man he had become. Edward had come to understand that true justice is not as rigid as stone, but as flexible as bamboo, able to bend with the wind without breaking. He had learned that to rule with wisdom, one must first learn to serve. Just like Edward, we all face dilemmas where we strive to do what is right, yet the answer is not always clear. Life calls us to look beyond appearances, to listen before deciding, and to find balance between reason and compassion. True justice is not found in harsh sentences, but in the ability to see the humanity in others. Perhaps today you stand before a difficult choice. Before you act, ask yourself, am I seeing the situation through the eyes of my mind or the eyes of my heart? Edward's journey reminds us that wisdom is not a privilege reserved for kings, but a path open to all who seek truth with humility. I'll see you in our next reflection. Until then, may your pursuit of truth be as enriching as Edward's.